Welcome to the Journal of Biofuelic Design podcast. Well, many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biofuelic Design today. We're really thrilled to be joined by Ben Dean, who's the Chief Operating Officer for Square Mile Farms. They bring vertical farms to workplaces. They help companies create healthier environments and also be more sustainable. They're going to tell us how, or he's going to tell us how he does that, the company does that, and also a little bit more about urban farming. So, Ben, many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for speaking. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. And can you tell us what the idea is, please, about Square Mile Farms? You know, what exactly you do there?
Yes. God, where to begin? So I guess our founder came up with the concept actually because he'd worked in management consultancy for years, so was based in the city. And he talks very clearly of this one particular day when he's high up in a tower, I think it was Heron Tower, and he looks over and sort of while appreciating the architecture of the city, he just realized how grey it was, and just thought, God, what a shame that there's all that space that isn't being used, mainly on rooftops, but also vacant walls, and also how ungreen it was. And was just thinking, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could almost change both of those aspects? And his wife is a nutritionist, and so they were sort of playing with growing lots of things at home themselves, and that's really where it spawned from. And he started playing around, and as all good startups do, he started with a container in his back garden. So learned that he could grow, hydroponically, very, very well in a small sort of environment. And that's really where it started. And then I guess now, everyone has joined the business for the purpose of trying to solve some of the real problems in our food network that we're experiencing currently, mainly from large-scale agriculture, industrialization, globalization, and the expectation really from society that food will be, there all year round, whenever we want it, incredibly quickly, which is, fantastic service, but also has some really negative consequences in terms of environmental sustainability, in terms of health and wellness. And so really, Square Mile Farms exists now to try and reconnect people with food, to understand where it's coming from, to get closer with it. And then as a result, make urban farming a lifestyle is sort of our greater vision. And so, as you said, we're trying to put vertical hydroponic farms into urban areas. At the moment, mainly offices, co-working spaces, and sort of residential apartment buildings. And the aim is that it's an amenity effectively for that building and for that community. So like a community plot that just so happens to be inside all year round, and give that community the ability to grow their own food, participate in the harvesting, and to learn about the benefits of what it is to be an urban farmer.
I think that's really, really important. I mean, the whole concept of food security, I think, is a big issue, obviously, with global warming and where our vegetables come from. It's obviously all mass produced and everything. I think to bring awareness closer to home, if people are, just ordinary people, if you're in a banking environment, and just you can be so. It's easy, isn't it? You sort of get to work, you start work at 8 and you finish work at 6, assuming you're in the office, that is, of course. And it's a disconnect, isn't there, from where our food, where we see our food comes from. And oftentimes we might just go, we'll just grab something on the way back home in the supermarket without realizing. So actually what you're doing is a really great concept. So is that what urban farming is? Is that what when they refer to urban farming?
I mean, I think urban farming is really the ability to grow produce in an urban environment. So it might have a slightly grander sort of name than what it really is. We would probably say that anyone growing some basil on their windowsill could be considered an urban farmer, and someone who's got a giant 40-foot wall growing various different types of crop could also be an urban farmer. I think it's a phrase that we're trying to make a bit more maybe approachable and appealing for the average person. And I think that's also just a really important part of what sets us apart from maybe someone putting a living wall into a building or growing plants, is that it should be interactive and it should be educational. And we definitely want to be encouraging people to educate themselves, like you say, on the benefits of growing locally, on the food system, and the benefits of doing so.
I think I love the idea of being like an urban farmer. I've got, you can tell, I've got loads of plants in my house, and I actually look at the window, in the kitchen, and it's like Yeah, there's like all sorts of herbs and things. So I kind of like the idea of that. I might actually get myself a pair of dungarees and a hat and,
You should do. We've got slightly goony t-shirts actually that have in big letters on the back. This is what an urban farmer looks like, so that when we're at our client sites and doing our things, people are very aware that it's us. And I guess hopefully it makes it a bit more playful and approachable. Because I think there is, I think you've alluded to it, but I think there is this connotation that people will try and grow their own stuff and they'll just kill it, and it becomes expensive and time consuming and ultimately disappointing. So the more that we can help people, overcome that barrier and be more comfortable with it and find some, some fun, while actually having the tools to make a bit of a difference on sustainability, health and well-being, then we'll be doing very well. We'll be happy.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think actually also, I'm just thinking about it, if I was in one of these like sort of places where you've installed one, I would definitely collar you while you're fiddling around with the plants and say, look, my basil on the windowsill is doing this. What can I do? So actually there's obviously a sort of a double win-win. I mean, obviously we're going to sort of show us an example. I think you've got a video as well you were going to show us, and sort of, how it's easy to install and also, but can you describe maybe what plants that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it would be, when we talk about this, it's very nice to think and to believe that you can grow everything, and that actually hydroponics and vertical farming currently could completely substitute traditional farming. And it's not really the case. You can grow a huge variety of things, but it's just a little bit harder, and the technology is not quite there yet, really. So we grow 40 varieties basically of leafy greens and herbs. So that could be anything from lettuce and spinach, chard, kale, a lot within those families, and then effectively every herb that you could think of: basil, parsley, coriander, sage, thyme, etc., rosemary. And we've got very good at growing a lot of our core sort of staples. We know that we can grow them, have a number of harvests, and then replace the plant. We tend to try and grow things that you can cut and grow back, just because it makes them more interactive and slightly easier to manage. But we also have a little bit of we want it to be interactive, like we said. So we want the client to be able to dictate to a certain extent what they're growing. So, we've got one client, for example, who's a co-working space, who have said that everyone loves drinking mint tea. So could we have a couple of farm stands just purely of mint, which we've gone and done. So it's not just, what we want. We want the client to be able to, have a bit of control as well.
That's a great idea. I like the idea of having like, so pick your own mint tea. I think that's
exactly. Yeah.
When I used to work in Paris quite a while way, and there was the institute, the Arab Institute was opposite Montmartre. Obviously it's obviously not there now. That's why Montmartre, Notre Dame, and I used to go up there to have mint tea. So it would have been amazing to have kind of had somewhere like that. You could just pick the mint and say, right, I just need to make me some out of this, please.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a lovely idea. Actually, my grandmother had a cut and come again lettuce. It was literally, this lettuce lasted, I don't know how many seasons, but it was still there. We were still eating this lettuce. So, what kind of places have you installed one of your farms?
So we've effectively got three main verticals, if you will, that we're focusing on at the moment. So that's corporate offices. So a couple of our clients would be Vodafone and Mindful Chef, for example, and then co-working spaces. So I think everyone's very familiar with what co-working spaces are, and then also sort of residential apartment buildings. So I think in the long run, we would love to be able to deliver a product and a service to go alongside that could be to grow at home as well. And we do have a couple of clients that have bought sort of vertical external walls from us. But for now, we're just trying to be super focused and make sure we can deliver a fantastic experience for those three main client types. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's good. I was just thinking, if you're in a co-working space, having something like what you install is a great thing, because it gets people talking, doesn't it? It kind of gets that whole networking, while you're there looking at the plants or picking the leaves for your salad or for your sandwich or whatever it is, Absolutely,
it should be a community building amenity. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think it's a really great idea. It'd be nice to get them in actually into healthcare. I was just thinking, into like the restaurants and the waiting rooms, or not the, but where you're sitting having a cup of tea, or you're getting or if people are in there long term, even, what a lovely thing, to kind of pick your salad for lunch instead of.
Yeah, exactly. And we sort of think there's no end actually to the places where they could be, because I think everyone, honestly, you should see how people react to it when they see it. They just love it. It is like plants or like a living wall, but when people know that it's actually growing and they've seen it go from a tiny seedling to a mature plant over the space of 3 to 4 weeks, it's really quite, they're quite amazed by it in a literal sense. And so I think it does have that compelling impact on people. So I think something like hospital, absolutely, but it could also be experiential for, in bars or in hotels, or I think there's lots of applications that hopefully in the future we'll get to explore.
Really nice idea. And the video you're going to show us, can you tell us about what the video is? Perfect.
So I've got a couple of videos here for you actually now. So this first one is just a bit of a up close of one of our farms in Vodafone. So this is one of our farm stands, and this is our farm wall in the background.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Zoom in here and get nice and close on the colors. But yeah, so they're the two form factors that we tend to have. This is also the Vodafone Farm, but it is with a load of the community there. And actually this was really great. Basically, it was a big team that had been split across COVID, so they hadn't been together for a very long time. And they actually hadn't seen the farm. So they came round and we did basically a harvesting event for them across the afternoon with various different team members. And what we do when we run a harvest is we have, as you can see, our urban farmer t-shirt there. We will run the harvest. We get the participants to get involved and to harvest what they want themselves. And then we'll just explain what urban farming is, how hydroponics work, what are the benefits of it, how to harvest the different crop, properly, etc. I think sadly at the end that cut out, but that was Dish just showing the group exactly where to cut on a basil plant to make sure that it can grow back again. So we try and make it super, educational and like you said, it should be an area where people can gather and actually build that community spirit.
Yeah, and also if you're training people as well how to cut like that, I mean, you're going to take that home with you, aren't you? You're going to learn how to, it's great. It's like a win-win all round. So
yeah, exactly.
I love the lighting. I love the lighting in there. Is that for a reason? Are the lights like that, or is it just funkiness?
No, it's not. It's a spectrum basically of light that plants grow particularly well under. They don't actually have to be like that. It just tends to be I think actually for different parts of their life and maturity, you could have different spectrum of light to sort of optimize the growth. But yeah, the purplish hue is very common among many vertical farms. But it's sadly not for the funky lights. But this is, if you can see the word relax in the background here, this is actually Vodafone Zen Garden. So that's what they wanted to call the farm. So it actually complements sort of their intentions of this area very well, which is nice.
Lovely.
But yeah,
great.
Hopefully that brings it to life a little bit.
It does. So thanks for that. Really great. So obviously you've shown us the Vodafone experience there, but how can you sort of talk around a little bit more maybe about how one of your urban farms helps people who experience it? Maybe it's the senses. Obviously smell with basil and things, but is it obviously the multi-sensory thing, but then what does it do to them? How do people say they feel, or how do they like it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would like to think in a few ways actually. I've got probably 4 that come to my mind. I'll try and get through them succinctly. I think firstly, as you will be very familiar with, just having plants, and that element of nature in an office has been proven to help productivity, make people feel more positive. And I think that relates to in the workforce terms, more higher productivity, less absenteeism, etc. So that side of it definitely helps with it. I think from a mental health perspective, similarly, it does as well. And we actually at that Vodafone farm, an employee came up to me once and said they go and meditate in front of the farm because they find it calming, which is a lovely piece of feedback. I think also because, like we said, that community building aspect to it, so people come and harvest together and take that time away from their desk, do that, which is a little bit maybe rare historically in office terms. It's a bit like the water cooler moment, but you're actually around a farm. So that should be a benefit. And I think the fact that you're just growing veg, you could be seeing that you're taking one of your 5 a day home with you once a week, which is very nice and obviously beneficial for your health. And then I think the sustainability impact we should definitely mention. So the fact that you can grow, completely locally with less water and avoiding obviously all the problems with large scale agriculture. So with every single bag that you take home that you're not buying, let's say from a mainstream supermarket, you should be saving or realizing a lot of benefit in that sense as well. So I think there's, and I'm likely to say this, but there's lots of benefits to having an urban farm.
Yeah. Also, they say that, and we're going to talk about biophilic design, but they say also about having a dynamic view of greenery. A dynamic view of nature is really good. So actually, obviously, living plants are great because they do change and move, and hopefully the leaves won't wilt, and that's not the dynamic aspect of it. But seeing something grow, I think, is vitally important. I think when you're in 4 walls and you're sort of stuck in an office environment. Again, me back to healthcare, but if you're in a environment where maybe you're at the end of life care or something actually, and you've got life around you, that's such a life-giving, life-affirming thing to surround yourself with. So I think I'm all behind what you're doing. I mean, sort of obviously biophilic design. Obviously, I mean, you know about it as well. But I mean, why do you think biophilic design is important, particularly in office design?
I don't know if you've read the book Zootopia. It's a fantastic book. It's sort of about the history of food really, and how it's arrived at this where it is today. But there was a lovely point she made, the author, in it, which is to say that whenever there's a depiction of paradise, there's always loads and loads of plants and nature, etc. So we've lived in this office life for years, for decades, and traditionally there's been none of that. It's just been a completely empty, lean, grey environment. So it seems completely ridiculous really looking back on it now that we didn't bring biophilia into the workplace sooner. Now that we have, there's been obviously lots of studies to show that it has a positive impact. And I think particularly in the COVID environment, people are now looking for ways to change the office, to entice people to come back, to make it a more welcoming environment and a more interactive environment. So I think particularly for office space, it's now of all times is very important.
Well, that's great. So but what can urban farming bring to biophilic office design? I mean, I have a lot of workplace consultants, interior designers, architects that listen to this podcast. What advice would you give them? What would you say to them? You should be including, like for instance, what you're doing. This urban farming. This sort of like growing your own food type thing. What would you advise them to do?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's we're just fortunately touching upon a lot of trends at the moment, things that are very important to people, health and well-being, particularly mental well-being. Obviously on the back of COVID, trying to get people back to the office, while occupancies are definitely still low. Most offices that we're working with are probably at the sort of 50-60%. So there's still a long way to go on that front, as well as obviously on the back of COP26 now, but in general, the whole sustainability move, everybody is wanting the tools to be able to make that little difference in their life. And for me personally, I think urban farming is just a fantastic way to do that. I'm talking specifically about sustainability here because it enables you to be able to be growing things on a day-to-day basis and tending to a plot that allows you to grow and take produce home with you, as opposed to buying it in the supermarket and just making that little difference yourself, knowing that you haven't bought something that's been grown in Morocco but has actually been grown literally in your office. And I think wider than that, offices, all the feedback we get is that offices and sort of office designers are looking for that little bit something different. Biophilia now, or plants in general, thankfully are everywhere. Like, you'd be remiss to find an office that doesn't have some sort of planting in it now, which is fantastic. But what we're doing is just take it to that next level. And we're trying to make that greenery interactive, and hopefully the benefits are also amplified as a result.
Yeah, great. I mean, you mentioned before we started recording that you're you're recruiting, so you're expanding. So are you seeing like an uptake? I mean, you obviously touch on it there. Obviously, people are trying to entice people back to the workplace and things. But are you finding more people are? You've seen an uptake, an increase in people's desire to have urban farms in their offices?
Vanessa, it's been incredible, honestly. We get so many inbounds at the moment, to the point where we're basically not really doing any outbound sales at the moment because there's just so much interest in it. Not quite sure how everyone is finding out about us still, because we're still very young and new, but yeah, demand is really high. We've got some fantastic brands reaching out and wanting this. So, and that's across, property managers, tech companies, everywhere it seems to have some interest in wanting to do this. So I think people are really recognizing the value, which is fantastic for us.
Well, I've met your other two people as well when I was at Planted, and you sort of came up to me and you seem like a really nice bunch of guys actually, and girls as well. So I think you deserve a lot of success, and I wish you well. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I ask you the final question?
No, I don't think so. I think thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you about it. Obviously with your experience across the industry and across many industries, it's just really great to have also someone else who's appreciating what we're doing and giving us that boost of confidence as well.
That's fantastic. Well, so the final question I ask everybody at the end of these podcasts, if you could brush the world with this magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think going back to our founder's original view and sort of problem that he saw, I think if we could have cities that were able to be growing produce and having greenery on every single unproductive area of land, so be that rooftops or basements or vacant walls or whatever, I think that would be incredible. I think the city would look a very, very different place. And furthermore, I guess if we could try and substitute, particularly in seasons when we are not able to grow in our own country, if we're not able to grow certain produce, if we can stop, importing and having that reliance on sort of, this food chain, and we can start growing things locally and becoming a bit more self-sufficient within cities, that would be an incredible, incredible result as well. But hopefully the magic brush is realistic at some point in the future. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.